Sup dogs, TheOdie here, and we are finally doing it. We are going to take the line of sight algorithm and push it to the next level. We are going to make it for an end user. And here's exactly what I mean. As you can see, we have 3 different goons, each with their own type of aura. And if I were to click on one, or even all of them, you will see that all of the code has truncated to 3 variables in a single comment event. So isn't that just absolutely amazing? Now, if I need to refer to this code in the future, all I need to do is use 3 variables in 1 common event. No longer do I have to control copy all of this code, paste it into a different one on a different map, and having to refer back to which variables I was using, which code do I have to change, what sort of things do I have to dissect and relearn just to do what I did a month ago. This is why creating a program for an end user is so important. It's actually us too. We're also an end user to our own program. Now with that said, this is actually really complicated. And if you don't get this, and if you're not interested in understanding the algorithm and all you want is the code, then that's totally okay. Stop with the previous video, control copy, control paste it into your different maps. Do it while it's fresh in your mind, change the little parameters here and there that you need to change. But for those of you who are more interested in learning to build AI and taking that extra leap forward to actually learning computer science, and more particular JavaScript, then continue with me. This will be a very valuable tool. This is what separates you from a game maker to a game developer. So let's do this, baby. But again, last warning, this is difficult. And the reason why it's difficult is because we will be learning about arrays, multi-dimensional arrays, to be more specific, in iteration. 2 very important tools when we have multiple events doing the exact same thing. And you're going to see why later on. Last thing to mention is that this is more of a learning tutorial than an executional tutorial. Don't get me wrong, it will work in your project, and as you use it in the future, it will continue to work, but you will see that it does have limitations. And if you can find a plugin to do this exact same thing, then you're honestly better off with going with the plugin. This is more for those who wants that extra step forward to getting a bigger grasp around computer science and the JavaScript language and how it exactly works in the RPG Maker engine. And as a matter of fact, this is actually my 3rd time in filming this. The previous versions were just too long and just very dreadful to sit through editing, so I can only imagine that those who wants to refer back to this video in the future, it will be very dreadful to go back to as well. So here's my 3rd try. 3rd time's the charm. 3rd clap. So as you can see from my map, we have 3 different goons, and as I click on one, you're going to see that we have a variable for LOS ID, one for aura type, and one for aura size. Aura type, of course, being the circle, cross, and triangle. But what I'm going to do is separate the screen to make this a little bit easier to understand. And from here, you can already imagine that we have 3 goons, goon 1, 2, and 3, and they're essentially doing the same thing. They're just patrolling, or maybe they're just standing still. They have an aura, and once the player crosses that aura, then the goon will chase the player. Now, the limitation here is that the code I created so far is just to have the chase based off of a timer. So if you're trying to chase indefinitely or grow an aura size, then unfortunately I did not take the extra step or the extra time to create that for this tutorial. Again, this is more so a learning tutorial than it is an executional one for your project. Now, we have our 3 goons, and it's going to do the exact same thing. So this already gives you an idea that we are going to separate this into a conditional branch, where if aura type equals 1, then we got the circle aura. Aura type 2, cross, and aura type 3, triangular. But here's the thing about these goons. As I click on each of them, you're going to see that they have the exact same parameters. LOSID, aura type, and aura size. So just like that, we have events literally repeating each other, except they have their own quote-unquote class. They have their own parameters. They have their own features. And those are the small differences that changes one from another. Now, one thing we could have done is, if I were to open up a control variable just to look at their properties windows, we could seclude these 10 variables just for the ID, where this one is this one over here, and this one, for example, is this one over here, and so on and so forth for each of our individual goons. But then that would also mean we would have to separate another 10 just for their aura type, where this one is this one, which is the circular aura, and then this one is for the triangular one. And say we have another goon that's also a circular one, so that's what this third variable would be for that other goon. And then we got to go into another set where we take another 10 just for the aura type in a similar manner, and then we take another 10 if they have their own property timer, where they each chase for X amount of time. And by the way, I already created a property for timer, and in the previous tutorial we were going to, or rather a previous recording, we were going to build it together, where a value of 1 equals 1 frame. So this would be 3 seconds, and this would be a total of 6 seconds, because 360 divided by 6, 60 is 6. And this one would be, let's go with 240, so 4 seconds. 240 divided by 60 is 40. So you can imagine how much resources they would use. But when we have these similar events doing the exact same thing, we can create what's called an array. For those of you who knows what arrays are and already understand 2D arrays, you can go ahead and skip forward to the very end where I show you the actual code. But for those of you who do not know what arrays are, then sit tight, we're going to do this together. So for now, let's just think about the variable LOSID, and again, we would be holding 10 variables just for the 10 potential different goons here on this map. But what if I were to tell you we can hold all of those into one single variable? And that's exactly what an array does. It can hold multiple values or multiple set of numbers in a single variable. In this code that you see here is exactly how we write it. So because of RPG Maker and it uses what's known as call references, it's calling a class called setValue to set this array within this variable. So this array has a total size of 3, 6, 7. However, when we refer to the position within the array, it actually starts at 0. Which means that if we want this number, it will always be the array size minus 1. So this would be at position 6, this is position 0, this is position 3. So to demonstrate some features of RPG Maker and arrays, I can type this, and if I were to test this, you're going to see that it will actually print out the entire array. Now I created another line of code that you see here on the second line, to refer to a certain position within variable 80's array. Oh, I realized I wrote that wrong. So this is actually calling value, and I will explain that a little bit once we see the value being printed. So there you have it. This is position 0, this is position 3, and that's why 5 is being printed out. So the way that the second line of code works is that it's doing the same set value into variable 79, except it's referring to game variable 80 at position 3 for the array, as you can see here. So position 3 is the value of 5. Now here's a weird thing about RPG Maker. If we want to say change the value of a single element within this array, we are not going to use set value. Instead, what we're going to do is something like this. Totally arbitrary number, by the way. And you're going to see that it's going to work, and it's going to confuse you. So at position 3, it should change from 5 to a very, very arbitrary number. And it did. See? And the reason why this is weird is because even though we're setting a value within the array, we don't have to call the set value reference. It's weird, right? From the examples that I showed you in the example that you see here, you think that you would have to call set value. So what's weird is that if we attempt to use set value in a similar manner that we see on this top screen, where we're assigning to game variable 80 at position 3 the number 69, it's, well, you guys will see it for yourself. It's not going to work. It's still 5. It's no longer that completely awesome arbitrary number that I just pulled out of a back of my mind. Or not back of my mind. What? Anyway, so it's weird. It's odd. I can't exactly explain it because I don't have that sort of background in computer science. This is kind of just all self-taught, and I through trial and error, so that you guys don't have to go through trial and error yourself. And I'm just showing you guys. But this is just what I found. So if you want to set value to a variable or an array at a certain position, we would type it like this and not like the second line that you see there. So do this, do not do that. So now, give it a try yourself. If you're following along, then try different positions and guessing to figuring out what they are. The last thing to mention about arrays is that we do have to initialize it before we can assign an element any values, even if you're trying to set a value at position 0. By the way, when I say element and position, I'm interchanging them. They mean the exact same thing to me. So you're going to see that if I remove this initialization and I just go straight here, it doesn't work. No holy number that we have or just randomly picked to assign there. So we have to always initialize it before we actually assign any value. Okay, so recall why we're doing this again. We have 3 goons on our map. Potentially, we could have 10, and the only reason why it's limited to 10 because that's how I created this program. So, another limitation when doing it this way, as opposed to having a plugin for it. And of course, that's also a limitation that I created for this program itself. So, that one array that we saw right here, 80, let's say that can hold all of the LOS IDs. But now we need another array just to hold the aura types and the aura size and their chase timer. And of course, each element will correspond to this goon. So position 0 will contain all of this for this particular event. And then position 1 will contain all of this information for this particular event, and so on and so forth, up to 10 goons on a map. So that means we will be changing it from a total of 40 variables down to 4 variables. Isn't that already so much better? But what if I can tell you we can condense it even more down to 1 variable? And that's where multi-dimensional arrays comes in, or more particularly 2D arrays, 2-dimensional arrays. So what that means is that, as you can see here, this is a 1-dimensional array. But what if I were to tell you, I can assign an array within an array? Just picking random numbers that I'm just typing out of without looking, by the way. Totally not doing anything suspicious with my numbering system. So bam, as you can see here, we now have a 2-dimensional array, because the first bracket, or the outermost bracket that you see, is the first dimension. And then the second bracket that you see that's inside between each comma, that's a set of arrays. So that means this one that you see here is the position 0 for the first dimension. And this is position 1 for the first dimension. But if we want to look at the numbers inside each of the second dimension, then this would be position 0, 1, 2, 3, 4 of the second dimension. And this one would be position 0, 1, 2 of the second dimension of element 1 of the first dimension. Very confusing when you're trying to say it in a sentence, but it makes a lot of sense when you actually look at it. So how do we refer to this? Well, let me just show you what happens when we print it out first and foremost. It's going to print each of the variables without any spacing, and it's kind of a cluster. But we know just by looking at this that the separation between the first dimension is right here. So this is position 0, and all of this is position 1. So very similarly, if we just want to look at a single element of the first dimension of this variable, then what we got to type is this. Go ahead and take a guess what will be printed out. So there you have it, the first element of the first array for variable 80. Now let's pull a number from its second dimension. Take a guess, what will be printed out? Pause the video where you have to. Boom, 65. Why? Because this is position 0, position 1, position 2, position 3 of the first element of the first array. So I'm going to do one more example. Do 0, 7. Oh, I don't think there's enough. Yeah, there is enough. Okay, take a guess. I kind of give you a hint there, but take a guess of what number will pop out. 0. Okay, there wasn't enough. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. If we try to go outside the range of the array, then RPG Maker will be like, yo, WTF, you didn't initialize it. I don't know what you're talking about. Here's a 0. Now be happy with it. So the system is pretty self-in-tuned, and it's really valuable for you to know and understand this so that when a bug occurs, you'll know exactly what to look for. So very similarly, if we just want to assign a particular number to a position within the array, then we just do something like this. And there it is, 777. So position 0, position 5, setting the variable. This is set 0, and it's going to 5. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So change 99 to 777. Okay, let's go back into our actual program and remember why we are going to 2 dimensions. Again, this one will contain an array for LOSID. This one will contain an array for aura type, an array for aura size, an array for chase timer. So that's 4 different variables, each with a single array to hold all of this data. But by bringing it into 2 dimensions, then we can say that this entire bracket for the first dimension at position 0, that can be LOSID. In this one, with inside of it, that one could be the event ID. This one can be the aura type. This can be the aura size. This can be the control timer. So now we just took all of that and condensed it into one single variable. And ain't that just really, really cool? And of course, for each of the repeating element, the position that holds each data will be the same. So always at position 0 for each of these arrays will be element or event ID. And then at position 1, they will all be aura type. Position 2, they will all be aura size. So on and so forth for as many as we need or as many as we created. And really, you're going to see that it is just as simple as that. And we actually look at our code, which will freak you out at first. But when you actually look at it and dissect what is going on, like you can see here, all I did was replace the variable with the array and its element. So 0, 0, 0, 1, you're going to see all of that. And it's going to make so much sense later on. But before we actually dive into this, we have to, of course, initialize our two-dimensional array. And the best place to do this is not on the map where you have the game or where you have the line of sight event going off. No, it's not here. Instead, I would really recommend that you guys create a starting map. And within this starting map, you initialize any variables, any switches, prepare any images, or do whatever you need to do before the player actually jumps in and start the game. So if I were to open this up, you're going to see it right here. That's literally what it is. And then it transfers the player to where they need to be. Now, this one is not necessary. The only reason I had this one is so I could remember what variable 40 is. It's LOS array engine. And then later on, I told myself, you know what? I'm going to just type it all out in a comment. This way, you guys can look at those comments when you need to and refer to the positions that I am talking about throughout this tutorial. So as a matter of fact, I can just take this and control cut. The reason why this is okay to do at the starting map is because right now, the moment you hit new game, LOS array engine equals 0. And then this one will execute, and then it will initialize it as a two-dimensional array. And the way I have it is that at position 0, event ID, 1, aura type, 2, aura size, 3, inside aura, 4, search timer underscore I, that will make sense once we jump into it. And then 5, search timer property. Search timer property is how long each goon will actually chase the player for the moment the player steps outside of the goon's aura. So if we have it at 3 seconds, then they will chase for 3 seconds. If they have it for 5 seconds, then we'll chase it for 5 seconds for another goon. And then another goon, we got 7 seconds, chase for 7 seconds. Now, I do have something very unique, and it's called index 0. And at each position, very similar to what you see up here, they have their own set of values. And the reason for this is because they become an important role in the iteration portion that I talked about that you guys will be learning. And I did not want to use an extra variable. The reason for that is because I want to make this as friendly for the end user as possible, so that in the future, 2-3 years ago, when I decide that I want to create a line of sight program or a line of sight event for my players, all I got to do is open up this old project I created in 2021, literally copy all the common events, paste it into the new file, and the only thing I need to do to start the line of sight aura chasing is these 4 variables in this one common event. That's it. And of course, you can change these variables to different numbers, but you will see that 40 is being held hostage by me personally, and you can change it to any variable number that you want, such as, I don't know, throwing some random number out there, 69. So every time you see 40, you can replace it with 69. Okay, so going back to the start map and explaining what index 0 is about, this means that when I assign LOSID, it will always be between 1 and 10. It will never be 0. 0 holds unique values that's just for me, and the end user will never use that LOS ID assignment. If they do, program will not run the way it wants to run. And again, this is another limitation for doing it this way as opposed to creating a plugin. But the good news is that the more you learn about this, and as long as you understand the algorithm and why it works and how it works, the only thing you need to know left is JavaScript, the language itself. I mean, you're partway there because you know how to do code, you know how to initialize arrays. Well, RPG Maker's version of initializing array. But really, all you need to know is hello versus hola, or hello versus konnichiwa, and then bam, you're good to go. Last thing to mention about this is that why is it a limit of 10 goons per map is because I only created 10 elements. So 3, 6, 9, 10, 11. 0 is being held hostage, so it's just 1 through 10. So of course, if you want more, just literally copy and paste more of these. Like so. Now I got 11 in one map. Very easy as that. Okay, it is officially time to hop into this common event and understand exactly what is going on. So I did break this up into separate line of sight common events, and because so it is holding all of these hostage. That's 5 through 11, so that's a total of, I believe, 7. Yep, it's holding 7 common events hostage. I could literally condense it down to 2 common events where all of these will just be inside LOS master, but I wanted this to be easy for you guys to read and understand, and especially if you're just building this for the first time, I do highly recommend that you do hold a bunch more common events hostage where you're just calling to them within a common event. So it's kind of like Inception in a way. You have a common event calling another common event. But I do highly recommend it because it's very good practice for when you do decide to take that leap forward and actually learn JavaScript. And also, you could imagine if this was all inside one common event and I need to look for the circle engine, then that would mean having to scroll all the way down trying to decipher my own code where circle begins and where circle ends, and it will just be a nightmare. Very good practice to separate it by its class or category if you understand it as categories better. Okay. So hopping into these goons, you're going to see that it calls line of sight. So I'm going to go to that common event, line of sight, which is 11. And you're going to see that all it does is reassign certain values. So 37 is LOS mob ID, but LOS mob ID is not an array. It's just a single variable, as you can see here. But what it's doing is that it's assigning LOS mob ID inside an array. Array 40. 40 being the LOS array engine. And it's putting it inside. Do you see this first bracket? This first bracket is the first dimension. So if LOS mob ID is 1, then it's going to assign it within the first position. And then it's going to dig into the second dimension and store it into position 0. But what it's exactly putting in is the event ID. So to kind of bring it full circle and make it easier to read and understand, I'm going to go back to where I initialize it. And you're going to see that it's going to position 1. Actually, I'll copy this. This way it's easier for you to look at it and make comparisons. So this one should not be here. Do not copy and paste it in here. I'm actually going to delete it once we finish looking at all of this. So again, it's going to game variable 40. Game variable 40 array engine. First position. Value variable 37. LOS mob ID. Let's say that's 1. Why would it be 1? Well, if I go back to my RUs, we're going to see that this one is 1. You're going to see that this one is 2. and that this one is 3. So this one is going to equal, let's say 1. We're going to look at this goon here. So that's 1. So it's going to this position. And then it's going to go into the second dimension, element 0. That's this one over here. And now it's the event ID. Oh my god. Now let's look at you. LSID 2. So we're going to look at this again. Oh my god, it's going into, what is the value of 37 equal? 2? Okay, so it's going into this position, this set. And then position 0. Oh my god, that's also event ID. And I think you guys get it from there. So very similarly, for the next one, you're going to see that it's calling 37, because again, 37 is just where within these sets it will assign the value to. So 37 is always LSID, and let's assume it always equals 1. So we're just looking at this bracket here, and at position 0, event ID. Position 1, because that's 1. Position 1, value of 38. 38 is the aura type. Position 2, so this one's position 2, it's going to be assigned 39 aura size. And what do you know? Look at this. Look at this comment. It's literally following all of that. So event ID, aura type, aura size. And then we got some weird one over here that's going straight to position 5, and it's going to be assigned 36. 36 because that's LOS timer, and I created that in a previous recording of this video because we were going to build it together. But because I decided to refilm this, it's already here. So position 5. Search timer property, that's how long the goon will chase the player for, and that's going to be here, position 5. Alright, so all of that checks out. And then we have a last one for, oh, that's unique. Could that potentially be a unique value? And it absolutely is. And I realized I did not copy and paste that comment there, so I'm going to just go ahead and grab it and paste it here for your reference. So it's going to unique value within index 0, going to position 4, map ID. So that's this one, the one that never gets assigned by the end user. Our own unique value. So with that, we can move on. And you're also going to see that it uses a switch called line of sight. So with that said, I can delete this and we can move on. You're probably wondering why we need to store the game map ID. Well, I'm going to go onto test shutdown, and over here at test shutdown, it's going to check if we are no longer on the same map. And if we're no longer on the same map, then it will shut it down. So let's think about that very, very literally. We're on this map. This goon is calling this common event. All these goons are calling that common event, as a matter of fact. So we go to line of sight. It's being initialized. This map ID is 6. So it's being assigned 6 right here in 04. So say we move on to a different map, map 7. Well, the switch is going to turn on. And when the switch turns on, it actually turns on LOS master. And if we look at the end of LOS master, there's going to be a common event called test shutdown. So let's take a look at test shutdown. We're currently on map ID 7, but because no events on map ID 7 is calling line of sight, because they don't have any of these chasing goons, unique value 04 is still going to be 6, and 6 is not going to equal to 7, so it's going to reinitialize all the values and turn line of sight off. And that's why it works. And as a matter of fact, I do want to switch this around. This way, we turn off the engine first, and then we reinitialize the values. Why do you want to reinitialize the values? Because let's say this map have 3 goons, and on the next map it only has 2 goons. Well, it's going to hold some values in this element here, element 3, and the program will see that, which you're going to see in LOS master, and it's going to be like, hey, our program says you got some values assigned here, but I don't see that event here on this map. I am just going to cause an error. And again, that's something you're going to see pretty much now, because we're going to cover LOS master. So going to the tippity top, you're going to see all of these comments again, just for your reference to understand. And then if we go down, you're going to see that two-dimensional array being referred to. And this portion here, in addition to this one right here, is where the iteration occurs. So right here, we're going to unique value 02. So 02 LOS underscore I. Whenever there's an iteration, it's very typically labeled as I. So that's why it's called LOS underscore I for me. So what's going on here is that if LOS underscore I equals 11 or 0, then set it back to 1. And the reason we want to do that is because if we were to look throughout the code, it's going to refer to 02 several times. So this 02 LOSI is the engine cycling through 1 through 10 because we have the potential of 10 goons on the map. This 1 through 10 is LOSID. So looking at this one here, 4000, oh yeah, so these two. Oopsies, oopsies, oh god, I'm crashing. Okay, so these two, 00 and 01, in all honesty, I didn't need to create this. The only reason I created this was because I had 2 open slots to do something with, and I didn't know what to do with it. So all I did was condense a much longer statement into a somewhat shorter statement. So 4000 will equals 40 LOSID that you see here. Otherwise, LOS underscore I. So we're looking at position 1, and then we're going to 0. So that's the event ID calculation temporary, or the event ID in question. So this one here, the second one, will be aura size, and you're going to see it as exactly that. So this first bracket, LOS underscore I. Let's pretend that it's 1 right now because that's the current iteration. And then it's going to go to position 2. Position 2 is, of course, aura size. And it's going to be assigned in 01, which is aura size calculation temp. And don't worry if you don't understand the iteration. I'm going to go through this through 2 or 3 iterations, and then it's going to make some sense. But the best way for you to think about it right now is that this here is the mother brain, and it's cycling through 1 all the way up to 10 for our 10 potential goons, which means it will finish its process after 10 frames. So again, that's another limitation with doing it this way versus a plugin. And if you don't understand that timer, then please watch this video where I explain that parallel process have a secret wait timer of 1 frame per iteration. Okay, so moving on, going over here, we are now checking the event ID to see if it's 0. If it's 0, then that means that ID does not exist. And if that does not exist, then we'll just skip all the way to the bottom, where we'll increment, and then it will test the shutdown. So upon iterating, so now we're from 1 going to 2. So it will test this condition. Does it equal 11? Does it equal 0? No. Skip that. So it's going into here. Remember, this whole giant blurb here, that's the exact same thing as LS underscore I. Currently it equals 2. So this is saying 2, 0, position 2, 0, event ID. So right now, this one's in question. And I know I skipped one. I did it on purpose so that we can understand it. But don't worry, with 2, we are going to dive into the LOS circle, cross, and triangle. So now at 2, we're going on unique value 01 aura size calculation temp, going to LOS underscore I of 2. So 2, again, it's U, and then it's going to position 2, which is aura size. So moving on over, here we're now going to test if the event ID is 0. It's not 0. As a matter of fact, it's 7. So event ID is 7. And now it's going to dive into here, which is 02. 02 is the order size calculation temp, which it does have one. It should be assigned to the cross. Here it is. And remember that in line of sight, it got reassigned to right here. So going back to master, it equals 2. So now we're going to go into the cross section. If we go into the cross section, well, this is going to be very horrendous, but it's omega long. The only reason it's omega long is because we are literally replacing every single time where it said game variable 37, for example, to game variable dot value 40, 00, and 01 based on what values those hold. So literally, if you were to look at it, it's the exact same thing that we built in the previous video, except we just changed out the terms. So here, remember is inside aura, that switch? Well, now it's a variable, and it's 0 and 1. 1 is true, 0 is false. So 02 is unique value, LOS underscore I. Right now is currently equals 2. And now it's going to the third element. The third element is inside aura, setting it false. This is the test condition. 00 is the event ID in question. 01 is the aura size in question. And there we see 00 again. Continuing forward, we see 00 again, so that's the event ID. Continuing forward, 01, aura size, so on and so forth. So it's literally just that. Go ahead and do a side-by-side comparison. Hell, I probably even brought it up just now, just to show you. Good job, future TheOdie. So that's it. So once it goes to the end, it's going to go back to LOS master. It just finished through this conditional branch, so it's going to go to the end. Then it's going to increment. Now, LOS underscore I equals 3. Well, which one is that one? It's this goon over here, and it's a triangular one. So we already know what's going to happen here. We know what's going to happen to here. This one's just testing if the event ID exists. It does. And now we're in triangle over here. If it does not equals 1, and if it does not equals 2, then it must equals 3. So going into triangle, and bam, exact same stuff. Exact same stuff. So the other thing to mention is that the current program that I created, it does not work with a facing direction. It literally just has a full rounded aura. If you guys want to, you can try and build it yourself to figure out what to do. But my hint for you there is that you will have to increase the array size of this element. And in doing so, you also increase the array size of index 0, the unique values. And if you end up not using it, just make a little comment to yourself that it's not in use. Okay, going back to master. Now let's think about it incrementing up to 4. So it's going to 4, going back up here. Oh no, LOS ID equals 0, so going to 5. Okay, going 6. Okay, going 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. It equals 11. Okay, setting it back to 1. And then it repeats the process. Now, at 1, because we didn't look at circles yet, if I go into circles, you're going to see literally the exact same stuff, except now we have an array instead of a single variable. Literally it. And then you're going to see that there's also an LOS timer. If I go back to master, you're going to see LOS timer over here. Oh, sorry, I actually missed it. Maybe some of you guys caught on to that. But LOS timer actually happens after LOS circle, after LOS cross, and after LOS triangle. Regardless of what path they go to, they will always go into LOS timer. However, if the event does not exist, then it will just skip it entirely and go here. So what's going on in LOS timer? The exact same thing. So if we're thinking about LOS underscore I equals 1, so aka the circular one, and we were to look at this one, here's the incremental value. So that one is 4 search timer underscore I. So it's incrementing. As you can see here, it's incrementing. And then over in here, this is testing if the player is inside the aura. And then within it, so we do have to do something a little bit different. This is the self switch. And that's how you initialize a self switch through script. So what I did was I created a variable, and that variable is, believe it or not, an array itself. It's an array of, guess what the size is? 3 at position 0, the map ID, at position 1. Can you guess what that is? Go on. Guess. It's the event ID, because what you see here, this is LOS underscore I, and this is position 0, which is event ID. And at the second position, we have the self switch, A. And then over here, we actually call it, so dot set value, key, that's the key, and we're setting it true or false. So literally everything we did. The only difference is, yes, it's an array, but we're also going to look over here. This is a key difference, and this is the search timer property. How do I know that? Because if we look at this, remember 02 LOS underscore I, so it's the goon in question. If we're looking at 1, aka this goon, and we're going to position 5. Position 5 is search timer property. As we saw with line of sight, it got assigned here. Position 5 took value of variable 36, LS chase timer, going into position 5, search timer property. So timer. And the only difference that you see here is that it's divided by 10, because there are a total of 10 iterations. Remember, parallel process and its secret wait timer. If you don't know that, check out that video. It will be very valuable. So there you have it. We did all of this. So there was one more thing that I wanted to do, and it was to change this switch and store it inside unique value 5. But when I was about to do it, I just realized that this LOS master runs off of the switch right here. And because we can't exactly do anything to tell it to refer an array or a variable at all, it's always a switch, we can't do anything. It's a limitation within the RPG Maker engine. So there you guys have it, your last and final limitation with doing things this way instead of a plugin. So with that in mind, play around with it, test it out, change up some value. You're going to see that if I create another one, he will work just as well. 10 seconds, or type 1, or size 3. And this one over here is what controls the circles that you see. Of course, you guys do not need that. So here we go. You're chasing me. Each goon with their own set timer for chasing. So that one on the bottom right, the smaller circle, is going to chase me for 10 seconds, I believe. Let's start the count. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi, 4 Mississippi, 5 Mississippi, 6 Mississippi, 7 Mississippi, 8 Mississippi, 9 Mississippi, 10 Mississippi. Stop! And I think this one was 3 seconds, so I'm going to dance inside his aura, and then I'm going to go out. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi. Stop! There he goes. He doesn't need to get in position. Sorry, I noticed that there was a bug, and it was the fact that if we were on this map and the goon, so let's say this one was chasing us, and we were to leave the map and come back, and let's say that his self switch A was not turned off in time, then, well, he will be stuck on self switch A. And this goon would no longer be calling line of sight, no longer having the parameters, and it will just be stuck on this self switch forever chasing the player. So to fix that, I went ahead into LOS test shutdown, and I just inserted this bunch over here. So all that highlighted in blue was added in, and it's another iteration from 1 through 10 to test if, which you can see here, if the LOS ID does exist, if the goon exists, then it will just turn off self switch A, which you see on this one here. So go ahead and dive in, recall what 4002 is, recall what 4004 is, and why this does in fact work. Last thing to mention is that a download file of this is available, which you can find in the descriptions down below. So feel free to download it, and all you would have to do is copy each of these common events into your own personal project and be mindful of which variables are being used. And those variables in particular are 36 through 40. And there is one switch being used, and that one single switch is 40. You also have all the comments to remind you what's what. You guys did it. Congratulations. Seriously, give you guys a nice pat on the back. I congratulate you. Really, really well deserved. This is difficult. It's not easy to develop. Don't be surprised if you're just starting this for the first time and you don't exactly get it within the first sitting or overnight or over a weekend. It will take time to develop from creating code for your game to creating code for an end user. But you guys are going to see that it will be very, very valuable for yourself from a game maker to a game developer. That's truly a dream or truly a hobby you want to take forward for years from now, then take the time. Really take the time to develop to this phase. It's very critical and very, very reuseful. Resourceful. Reuseful. Alright, so thank you guys so much for watching. If you have questions, which I'm sure you guys will, feel free to ask below. Make the comment section a community within you guys. Help each other. I'll be there to look at the comments as well when I have free time to help explain. And sometimes maybe I'll need a little bit more explanation, so don't mind if I have to be like, at what timestamp are you referring to? Because this is going to be a long one. But very thankfully, it's a much shorter one. Although, regrettably, it's a more editing heavy one. Future TheOdie is going to hate me. Alright, thank you guys so much. Hit that like button if you enjoyed. And I do a lot more of this stuff, and I even do this stuff for the game I'm currently creating called Caster's Trap. It's a puzzle horror game, which I would really, really much enjoy if you guys go check it out. I have game development vlogs, and I also have an Instagram for behind the scene pictures. And at some point, I'm still working on it, but I'm actually creating a website for both the tutorials and Caster's Trap. So be on the lookout for that video when I go and announce that. All the links are in the descriptions, in the comments, in that little circle over there. I always get it wrong, but I think I'm starting to get it down. So click on one of that to see more, and thank you so very much. See you in the next one. Till then,